I'm Edward, 36 years old, and for the past 15 years I've been a long-haul trucker, a career choice that made me the black sheep of my family. My father, a wealthy restaurant owner, and my siblings with their respectable professions never missed a chance to remind me how I'd disappointed them. But nothing prepared me for that family gathering last spring when they tried to trap me with a $6,000 restaurant bill after years of mockery. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Are you someone who's had to defend your career choice to family? Hit subscribe and join me as I share how I finally stood up for myself after years of judgment. Growing up in our suburban Chicago neighborhood, the pressure to succeed was always suffocating. Our 5-bedroom house with its manicured lawn and swimming pool wasn't just a home. It was a testament to my father's success story. Robert Mitchell, my father, started with a small sandwich shop, and through relentless work and cutthroat business tactics, built it into Mitchell's Fine Dining, a chain of upscale restaurants across 3 states. He never let us forget how he clawed his way up from lower middle-class roots to provide us with opportunities he never had. My mother, Linda, played her part perfectly as the restaurateur's wife. She hosted dinner parties for potential investors, organized charity events that conveniently featured catering from my father's restaurants, and maintained the social connections that kept our family in the right circles. She was elegant, poised, and completely committed to my father's vision of success. Then there was my sister Amelia, 3 years older than me and my father's pride. She checked every box on his success list, top of her class in high school, Ivy League undergrad, and then Harvard Law. By the time I was struggling through my sophomore year of college, she was already working at a prestigious law firm, specializing in corporate law, and making more money than most people twice her age. Family gatherings became showcases for Amelia's latest accomplishments: her promotion to junior partner, her strategic marriage to a surgeon, her designer wardrobe that somehow always came up in conversation. My brother Jason, 2 years younger than me, followed a similarly golden path. While I was trying to figure out what I actually wanted from life, he was being accepted to medical school. He specialized in cardiology, and by 30 he was part of an exclusive medical practice catering to wealthy clients. My father introduced Jason as my son, Dr. Mitchell, at every opportunity, his voice swelling with the pride that I never heard when he mentioned my name. And then there was me. From my earliest memories, I was drawn to anything with wheels and an engine. When I was 7, I spent an entire summer taking apart and rebuilding an old radio-controlled car, figuring out how every piece worked together. By 12, I was helping our neighbor Mr. Lawson work on his vintage Mustang, absorbing everything he taught me about engines, torque, and mechanical systems. My father dismissed these interests as playing with toys, and later as a phase that I would outgrow once I discovered real ambitions. In our family, education wasn't just important, it was the only acceptable path. Dinner conversations revolved around academic achievements, test scores, and college applications. When I brought home B's while Amelia and Jason brought home perfect report cards, the disappointment was palpable. Edwards just needs to apply himself. My father would say, as if my average grades were a choice rather than my best effort at subjects that never captured my interest. I tried, I really did. I accepted the spot at the business school my father had pulled strings to get me into. I sat through lectures on marketing strategies and financial projections, feeling more disconnected with each passing day. The only class that ever held my attention was a logistics course, where we studied supply chain management and the complex systems that move goods across the country. The summer between my sophomore and junior years changed everything. With my father's reluctant blessing, I took a job at a shipping company instead of the restaurant management internship he had arranged. The position was supposed to give me insight into business operations, but what it really gave me was my first experience sitting behind the wheel of a delivery truck. The freedom I felt on the open road, the satisfaction of mastering the handling of a larger vehicle, the sense of purpose in connecting suppliers to customers, it all clicked in a way nothing in the classroom ever had. When I returned to college that fall, everything felt wrong. The classroom seemed smaller, the assignments more pointless, and the career path ahead like a prison sentence. After 3 weeks of sleepless nights and growing anxiety, I made the decision that would fracture my family relationship for the next 15 years. I dropped out of business school to pursue a career as a truck driver. My father's reaction was nuclear. He called me to his home office, his face flushed with anger I had rarely seen even during his worst restaurant kitchen meltdowns. "You want to throw away everything I've built for this family to become a what? A trucker?" He spat the word like it was dirty. "People in our circle don't drive trucks, Edward. They hire people to drive trucks." "It's honest work," I argued. "The country depends on truckers for everything: food, medicine, clothing. Without us, the whole system falls apart." "Without us," he laughed coldly. "You're already talking like one of them. Listen to me carefully. If you continue with this ridiculous plan, you're on your own. No financial support, no connections, no inheritance. Everything I've built for children who respect what it means to be a Mitchell." In that moment, looking at my father's face, contorted with disappointment and status anxiety, something inside me solidified. I would make it on my own terms. I would build something I could be proud of, without sacrificing who I was. "Then I guess I'm on my own," I said quietly, standing up from his leather office chair. I'll never forget the look of shock that replaced his anger. He had never expected me to choose my own path over his approval. That night I packed everything I could fit into my used Honda Civic and drove to a friend's apartment. The next morning I applied to a truck driving school, using my small savings from summer jobs to cover the tuition. I was determined to prove that success didn't have to look like my father's definition. It could be built on my own terms, through work that actually meant something to me. Truck driving school was nothing like the business school classrooms I'd left behind. Instead of theory and case studies, everything was practical, hands-on knowledge that had immediate application. I learned the complex regulations governing commercial driving, mastered the techniques for handling a vehicle weighing up to 80,000 pounds, and studied the intricate logistics of interstate commerce. For the first time in my educational experience, I excelled without effort because the material actually engaged me. Obtaining my commercial driver's license (CDL) was one of the proudest moments of my life, though I celebrated it alone. I'd sent a text to my family about the accomplishment, receiving only a terse "Good luck with that" from my brother, and silence from everyone else. My first months on the road were admittedly brutal. As a rookie driver, I got the routes and schedules nobody else wanted. I drove through blizzards in the Midwest, navigated mountain passes with dangerous switchbacks, and endured endless stretches of monotonous highway that tested my focus and endurance. I slept in the cab's small berth, showered at truck stops, and learned to cook simple meals, using a portable electric cooker to save money. But there was something deeply satisfying about the work that my family could never understand. Each delivery completed meant medical supplies reached hospitals on time, grocery stores could stock their shelves, or construction projects could continue without delay. I was part of the invisible infrastructure that kept America running, and that knowledge gave me a sense of purpose. My father's restaurants serving overpriced meals to people showing off their wealth never could. After 18 months of saving every penny while driving for a large shipping company, I had enough for a down payment on my own rig. A used but well-maintained Peterbilt 786. Becoming an owner-operator meant more risk but also more control and better pay. I named her Liberty because that's exactly what she represented to me. Over the next few years, I built a reputation among brokers and shipping managers as someone who delivered on time every time, regardless of conditions. I specialized in time-sensitive deliveries that other drivers avoided due to the pressure, but I thrived on the challenge. Gradually, my financial situation improved from barely making ends meet to comfortable stability. Through all this professional growth, family gatherings remained exercises in endurance. Initially, I tried to maintain connections by attending major holidays and family events, hoping that seeing my progress might change their perspective. I was wrong. The first Thanksgiving after I bought my truck, I arrived at my parents' house straight from a 3-day haul, too tired to change out of my jeans and flannel shirt before dinner. "Couldn't you at least have dressed for the occasion?" my mother asked, eyeing my clothing with thinly veiled disappointment. Amelia's brought her law partners and their wives. "Sorry, Mom. It was either arrive like this or not make it at all," I explained, too exhausted to be hurt by her reaction. At dinner, seated between distant cousins rather than immediate family, I listened as my father proudly introduced Amelia's recent class action settlement and Jason's research publication. When conversation turned to me, my father simply said Edward's still driving his truck before quickly changing the subject. Later that evening, Jason cornered me by the drinks table, lowering his voice to ensure no one else could hear. You know it's not too late to go back to school. I have contacts at several business programs that might consider you despite the gap in your education. This truck thing, it's just such a waste of your potential. I'm actually doing well, I countered. I've got steady contracts, I'm paying off my truck ahead of schedule, and I'm looking at expanding. Jason's patronizing smile made my stomach turn. That's cute, but let's be real. You're still just a guy who drives for a living. Do you really want to be 60 years old with nothing but back problems and road stories to show for your life? These interactions became the template for every family gathering. Christmas brought Amelia's backhanded compliments. That flannel actually looks nice on you, Edward. You've really embraced the whole trucker aesthetic. Father's Day dinners featured my father introducing doctors, lawyers, and business associates to everyone in the family except me. At my mother's birthday celebration, she tearfully confided that she kept my occupation vague when talking to her friends because she just didn't know how to explain it to people like us. The summer I turned 28, my mother's campaign to rescue me from my chosen career intensified. She began sending job listings for positions in my father's restaurant management team or with family friends' businesses, all accompanied by notes about health insurance benefits or retirement plans, as if I hadn't already established these things for myself. I spoke with Robert Jennings at the country club, she said during one particularly persistent phone call. His shipping department needs someone with knowledge of transportation logistics. It would be perfect for you, an office position with your background. You could wear nice clothes again, meet suitable people. Mom, I already have a career, I reminded her. I made 6 figures last year. Her pause spoke volumes. Well, that's surprising. But Edward, it's not always about money. It's about respect, connections, building something meaningful. I am building something meaningful, I insisted, just not something you recognize as valuable. Despite the constant belittlement, I continued to grow professionally. I developed a philosophy about work and worth that became my armor against my family's judgment. America was built by people who worked with their hands, who transported goods, who constructed buildings and roads, who served food and stocked shelves. Without us, the people my family looked down on their comfortable professional lives wouldn't be possible. Every time my father mocked my truck driving phase or my siblings made jokes about my blue-collar status, I reminded myself of this truth. By the time I hit 30, the financial gap between my family's expectations and my reality had narrowed considerably. While I wasn't living in a mansion like my father, or driving a Porsche like Jason, I was debt-free, aside from my newest truck, had substantial savings, and was investigating investment properties. None of them knew this, of course. I had long since learned to keep the details of my success to myself. Their perception of me as the family failure was too deeply ingrained to be changed by mere financial facts. As I entered my 30s, my business strategy evolved from simply driving routes to building a specialized transport company. The first major shift came when I secured a contract with a medical equipment manufacturer who needed climate-controlled, time-critical shipments delivered across the country. The precision required, and the stakes involved equipment that could literally save lives, meant they paid premium rates for reliable service. With this contract as my foundation, I took the biggest risk of my career, purchasing a second truck specifically outfitted for specialized medical transport. Finding the right driver was crucial. This wasn't just any driving job, but one requiring meticulous attention to detail and perfect reliability. After interviewing dozens of candidates, I hired Marcus, a former military logistics specialist with an impeccable driving record and the same work ethic that had built my reputation. The gamble paid off. Within 6 months, word spread about our reliability in the medical transport niche, and we added contracts with 3 more medical companies. By the end of that year, I purchased a third truck and hired Darius, another veteran with specialized driving experience. Mitchell Transport Solutions, named with a touch of irony that only I appreciated, was officially a small fleet operation rather than a one-man show. Our niche continued to expand beyond medical equipment to include other high-value, time-sensitive shipments, emergency parts for manufacturing plants, specialized electronics, and even occasional secure document transport. These weren't the typical loads most trucking companies fought over. They were specialized services that commanded premium rates and operated on tight schedules that many larger companies couldn't accommodate. The financial rewards exceeded anything I had imagined when I first sat behind the wheel of a delivery truck 10 years earlier. By my 33rd birthday, my annual income surpassed what Jason made at his medical practice, though neither he nor the rest of my family had any idea. I maintained a modest lifestyle by their standards, living in a comfortable but not flashy house, and driving a practical pickup truck for personal use. The real milestone came when I purchased my dream property, 30 acres of land, with a custom-built 3,000 square foot home, overlooking a small lake paid for entirely in cash. No mortgage, no debt, something neither of my status-conscious siblings could claim despite their prestigious careers. I invited no family members to my housewarming party, celebrating instead with the small circle of friends and colleagues who had supported my journey. While my family assumed I spent my life in truck stops and cheap motels, I was actually diversifying my income through careful investments. I purchased 2 commercial properties along major shipping routes and leased them to national truck stop chains, creating passive income streams that would eventually exceed my active business revenue. I invested in a small logistics software company developed by a former driver, which was revolutionizing route planning for specialized carriers like mine. The freedom my career provided allowed me to travel during downtime in ways my family never expected. While they talked about someday visiting Europe or Asia, when they could find the time, I spent 3 weeks exploring Japan's countryside, hiked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and took a month-long photography safari across Tanzania. I never posted these experiences on social media or mentioned them at the rare family gatherings I attended. Their perception of my life, as small and limited, had become almost amusing to me. More meaningful than the financial success was the community I found within the industry. My fellow drivers, dispatchers, warehouse managers, and clients formed a network of relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. We understood the importance of our work and the skill it required, regardless of how society at large might view a profession without fancy titles or corner offices. Among these authentic connections, I met Sophia, who managed logistics for a medical research company that became one of our biggest clients. Unlike the women my mother had unsuccessfully tried to set me up with over the years, and daughters of country club members who visibly recoiled at the mention of my profession, Sophia understood the complexity and importance of transport. Logistics. She saw the intelligence required to build a successful, specialized shipping company and valued the integrity with which I ran my business. Our relationship progressed naturally from professional respect to friendship to something deeper. Unlike my family, Sophia's parents, her father a carpenter and her mother a school librarian, never questioned the value of my work. The first time I joined them for dinner, her father engaged me in a detailed conversation about truck engine specifications and route planning strategies with genuine interest. Her mother asked thoughtful questions about the challenges of building a business from scratch. The contrast with my own family dinners was stark and refreshing. "You seem different around my parents," Sophia observed afterward. "Your family actually listens when I talk about my work," I explained. "They don't act like I should be embarrassed by what I do." She squeezed my hand. "Why would anyone be embarrassed by building something successful that helps people by this? That's something to be proud of." With each passing year, my need for my biological family's approval diminished. I had created a life that aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations. I had found people who appreciated me for who I was, rather than constantly measuring me against arbitrary standards of prestige. Still, out of some lingering sense of obligation or perhaps hope that someday they might see me clearly, I continued to attend major family events. Each time I steeled myself against the inevitable condescension and reminded myself that their opinion no longer defined my worth. What I didn't realize was that their awareness of me was shifting, though not in the way I might have hoped. They weren't beginning to respect my choices, they were beginning to see potential value in what I had built. The invitation to my father's 65th birthday celebration arrived via my mother's formal stationery rather than the usual text message or hurried phone call. The heavy cream envelope contained an actual printed invitation, specifying black tie optional and naming the Monarch Room at Mitchell's downtown as the venue my father's newest and most expensive restaurant location, occupying the Bation's top floor of a renovated historic building with panoramic city views. My first instinct was to decline. April was a busy month for specialized medical shipments, and I had personally committed to handling a cross-country delivery of experimental laboratory equipment that week. But before I could send my regrets, my phone lit up with an unexpected caller, my brother Jason. "Edward, you got the invitation right?" he asked, without bothering with pleasantries. "Just opened it. Look, I've got an important haul scheduled." "You need to be there," he interrupted, his tone unusually serious. "Dad's making some big announcements about the future of the family business. Everyone needs to be present. This isn't just another birthday dinner." Something in his voice caught my attention. Jason never called me about family functions. That was always my mother's domain. And he certainly never insisted on my presence. If anything, he usually seemed relieved when I couldn't attend. "What kind of announcements?" I asked cautiously. "I can't get into it over the phone," he replied. "But trust me, you'll want to be there for this. It affects all of us." After hanging up, I received similar calls from both my sister Amelia and my mother within the hour. This coordinated campaign to ensure my attendance set off warning bells, but curiosity won out over caution. I rearranged my schedule, assigning the important laboratory equipment delivery to Marcus, my most trusted driver, and blocked off the weekend for the trip home. The night of the event, I arrived at the Monarch Room, directly from the airport, having flown in from a business meeting in Denver. Though I'd chosen my best suit, a charcoal gray Tom Ford I'd purchased for client meetings with pharmaceutical executives, I still felt underdressed compared to the valet attendants at my father's establishment. The maitre d' escorted me to a private dining section separated from the main restaurant by etched glass doors. Inside, about 30 people were already gathered drinking champagne and making the kind of small talk that always made me feel like I was speaking a different language. I recognized family members, longtime business associates of my father, and several faces familiar from society pages, but unknown to me personally. "Edward." My mother's voice carried across the room with unusual warmth. She approached quickly, air-kissing near my cheek to avoid disturbing her makeup. "We were just talking about you. You look so polished tonight." Before I could respond to this backhanded compliment, my sister Amelia appeared at my elbow, champagne flute in hand and designer dress glittering under the chandeliers. "The prodigal brother returns," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Jason mentioned your company has been expanding. You'll have to tell us all about it over dinner." I nearly dropped my newly acquired champagne. In 15 years, neither Amelia nor Jason had ever shown the slightest interest in the details of my business. Something was definitely off. "Where's Dad?" I asked, scanning the room. "Finishing up some details with the chef," my mother explained. "He wants everything perfect tonight." "Oh, look who's here. You remember the Whitmores, don't you? Their daughter Charlotte just made partner at her investment firm." As my mother steered me toward a group of her friends, I noticed Jason in deep conversation with a man I didn't recognize, both of them occasionally glancing in my direction. The entire atmosphere felt charged with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. When we were finally seated for dinner, I found myself positioned prominently near my father rather than at my usual distant spot at family functions. The long table was already set with multiple wine glasses at each place, setting fine china bearing the restaurant's gold monarch butterfly logo and elaborate floral centerpieces that probably cost more than most families spent on a peak week's groceries. Notably absent were any menus. Instead, servers began bringing course after course without orders being placed: rare imported caviar on mother-of-pearl spoons, butter-poached lobster, with black truffle emulsion, Wagyu beef with foie gras. Each course arrived with a different premium wine poured generously and constantly refreshed. My father, seated at the head of the table, was uncharacteristically attentive toward me. "Edward, you must try this Bordeaux. It's from a small producer I discovered last year. Very limited production." Throughout the meal, family members and their guests asked me questions about my work with what seemed like genuine interest. How many trucks did I currently operate? What were the logistics challenges of medical transport? Was I considering expansion into new territories? After the main course, my father stood and tapped his crystal glass for attention. His commanding presence immediately silenced the table. Before dessert, I'd like to propose a toast, he announced, raising his glass. To family, our greatest strength and legacy. I'm proud to have all three of my children here tonight. Amelia, whose legal brilliance continues to impress everyone in her field. Jason, whose medical practice brings healing and hope to so many. And Edward, who has built his transportation business through determination and hard work. Each of you represents the Mitchell spirit in your own way. I nearly choked on my wine. Never in 15 years had my father spoken of my career with anything resembling pride or placed it alongside my siblings' accomplishments. Something was very, very wrong. As coffee and dessert were served, my father introduced several people I hadn't met before. Lawrence Bennett, a restaurant financier I vaguely recognized from business news, Marcus Whitfield, who apparently owned a restaurant supply chain, and Caroline Turner, introduced as a hospitality investment specialist. The evening proceeded with increasingly effusive compliments about my business acumen and entrepreneurial spirit from family members who had previously acted as if I drove a truck out of some form of rebellion rather than as a legitimate career choice. My brother actually used the phrase impressive logistics operation when talking about my company to one of the business associates. During a brief trip to the restroom, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my growing suspicions. Through the partially open door of a small private lounge adjacent to the restrooms, I recognized my father's voice speaking to someone likely Jason based on the response. He has no idea, but the financials show his company is worth at least $3 million now, my father was saying. The real estate holdings alone would cover a significant portion of what we need. And you're sure he'll agree to the arrangement, Jason's voice replied. He'll have no choice once it's presented as a family obligation, my father answered confidently. Besides, after tonight's bill, he'll understand the stakes involved. I slipped away before they noticed me, my mind racing. Whatever arrangement they were planning clearly involved my business and assets, and apparently tonight's extravagant dinner was part of the strategy. As I returned to the table, I looked at the elaborate display of food, wine, and false family warmth with new understanding. This wasn't a celebration, it was a setup. After dessert and cognac, the wait staff discreetly cleared the table, while my father signaled for everyone's attention once again. The friendly buzz of conversation died down as he stood commanding the room with the same authority he'd wielded throughout my childhood. As many of you know, he began this birthday marks not just another year in my life, but a significant transition for Mitchell's fine dining. After 4 decades in the restaurant business, I've been considering the future of everything we've built. He gestured to the business associates he'd introduced earlier. With the guidance of Lawrence, Marcus, and Caroline, we've developed an exciting restructuring plan that will secure the Mitchell legacy for generations to come. My father clicked a small remote, and a projection screen descended from a concealed ceiling panel. A sleek corporate logo appeared, Mitchell Family Holdings, followed by a series of professional slides outlining what appeared to be a major business reorganization. The restaurant industry is changing rapidly, he continued. To stay competitive and continue our growth trajectory, we're consolidating all Mitchell businesses under a single family holding company. This will include our 8 restaurant locations, the catering division, our wine import business, and several exciting new ventures in hospitality. As he clicked through slides showing projected revenue streams and expansion plans, I noticed that the financial figures seemed oddly inflated compared to what I knew about the restaurant industry's typical returns. Something didn't add up. What many of you don't know, my father said, his voice dropping dramatically, is that recent market challenges and some unfortunate investment decisions have created temporary cash flow issues for our core business. Rather than seeking outside investors who would dilute our family's control, we've made the decision to keep Mitchell's entirely in family hands. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. This was clearly not the celebratory announcement many had expected. To facilitate this restructuring and address our current obligations, we're creating a true family partnership. My father continued, his eyes now fixing directly on me. Amelia, Jason, and Edward will each make an equal capital contribution to the new holding company, becoming equal partners with me in all Mitchell enterprises. A slide appeared showing the family organizational chart, with 4 equal boxes connected to the central Mitchell Family Holdings logo. My name was there, linked to my siblings and father, with the words "Equal Partners" beneath. The capital requirement my father announced is $2 million per child. Amelia and Jason have already committed their portions. Edward, this is your opportunity to join your legacy with ours, bringing your business acumen and success into the family fold where it belongs. The shock must have shown on my face because my father quickly added, "Of course, we understand this requires careful consideration. That's why we've prepared comprehensive financial projections, showing how your investment will yield returns far exceeding what a trucking company could generate." My sister Amelia seamlessly took over, standing beside my father with the practiced ease of a courtroom presentation. We've already established the legal framework. Each of us will maintain autonomous control over our individual professional endeavors, while benefiting from the collective strength of the Mitchell brand and assets. She clicked to the next slide, which showed an alarmingly steep downward trend line labeled "Current Situation," followed by an aggressively upward curve labeled "Post-Restructuring Projection." Without this intervention, the current trajectory would lead to significant losses, she explained clinically. With our combined resources, we project 20% annual returns within 3 years. Jason stood next, adding the medical authority to this clearly rehearsed presentation. "This isn't just about money, Edward. This is about preserving our father's legacy and creating something we can all be proud of. It's about finally bringing your skills back to where they belong, the family business." As this coordinated pitch continued, I sat stunned, processing what was happening. They hadn't suddenly developed respect for my career. They had discovered I was successful enough to be useful to them. After 15 years of mockery and exclusion, they now wanted access to my hard-earned capital to save a business they had never allowed me to meaningfully participate in. When the formal presentation concluded, my father addressed the broader gathering. "And now, to celebrate this new chapter for the Mitchell family, I've arranged a special dining experience tonight that exemplifies the standard of excellence our brand represents." He nodded to the maitre d', who approached with a leather folder. "The evening's experience comes to a total of $6,342, which we'll divide equally among the 4 Mitchell partners as our first official family business transaction." My father looked at me expectantly, his expression making it clear this was a test. My willingness to cover my portion of this extravagant bill would signal my agreement to the larger arrangement. Finding my voice at last, I asked the question no one in my family had apparently considered important. "May I see the company's complete financial records before making any decisions?" A flicker of annoyance crossed my father's face. "There's no need to get bogged down in details tonight. The overview we've provided shows the essential picture." "Actually, I think the details matter quite a bit when someone's asking for $2 million, I replied, keeping my tone even despite the anger building inside me, especially when that overview suggests the company may be in serious financial trouble. "It's not trouble," my father snapped. "It's a temporary cash position issue coupled with strategic expansion opportunities." "So you don't have the cash to cover existing obligations?" I pressed. Amelia interjected smoothly. "Edward, this is hardly the venue for diving into financial minutiae. We can schedule a proper meeting with the accountants next week. Tonight is about commitment to family." "Exactly," Jason added. "This is your chance to finally do something respectable with your success, to be part of something bigger than driving trucks around the country." As they continued their coordinated pressure, campaign pieces began falling into place. The unusual warmth from family members who had dismissed me for years, the strategic seating arrangement, the absence of menus, and the parade of expensive dishes and wines. The entire evening had been orchestrated to soften me up, impress me with the trappings of real success, and manipulate me into committing my resources to save their failing business. "Have you approached my bank?" I asked suddenly, remembering the fragment of conversation I'd overheard. The slight pause before my father answered told me everything. "We've had preliminary discussions with several financial institutions about the restructuring. Meaning you, or someone representing you, has been investigating my finances," I translated. Have you also been contacting my clients? Another telling pause. We've merely been exploring potential synergies, my father replied carefully. Your client base represents possible catering opportunities for our events division. The full picture suddenly became crystal clear. They hadn't just discovered my success, they had actively investigated it, assessed its value to them, and were now attempting to appropriate it under the guise of family unity. Let me make sure I understand, I said, looking around the table at the family that had dismissed me for 15 years. Your restaurant empire is in financial trouble. You need cash, specifically $6 million from your children to save it. And after treating my career choice as an embarrassment for over a decade, you now want me to contribute $2 million to bail out your business because suddenly my truck money is good enough for you. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed every suspicion. My father's carefully maintained composure began to crack. The mask of celebratory goodwill slipped, revealing the frustration beneath. This isn't just about money, Edward, he said, his voice hardening. This is about duty to family. Your brother and sister have already committed their portions. Have they? I looked at Jason and Amelia. Or have they just agreed in principle without actually transferring any funds? Their exchanged glances told me I'd hit the mark. This wasn't a done deal, it was contingent on getting my buy-in first. The contracts are drawn up, Amelia replied defensively. We're just waiting on final signatures once all parties are in agreement. Because neither of you actually has liquid assets available, I concluded. You have high incomes but also high expenses, prestigious addresses, private school tuitions, country club memberships. You're cash poor despite the appearance of wealth. Jason's face flushed. That's completely beside the point. We're all making sacrifices for the family. Are we? I countered. Because from where I'm sitting it looks like Dad has overextended the business, and rather than facing the consequences of those decisions you're trying to use family obligation to access my savings. My father slammed his hand on the table, causing the crystal glasses to jump. Enough, I didn't raise you to be this selfish. This is about preserving everything I've built. Everything that gave you the opportunities you've had in life. Opportunities, I laughed incredulously. You cut me off completely when I chose my career. Everything I've built without your help or support. And now it's time to repay that family connection, he insisted. We've already scheduled meetings with your largest clients next week to discuss the transition plan. The audacity of this statement stunned me. You've contacted my clients without my knowledge or permission. We're streamlining the integration process, my mother interjected smoothly. The sooner we consolidate operations, the better positioned we'll be to leverage collective assets. Lawrence has already drafted an acquisition proposal for your company, my father added, nodding toward the financier. We're prepared to offer a very generous valuation as part of your contribution to the holding company. It dawned on me that they weren't just after my money, they were planning to absorb my entire business, the company I had built from nothing, while they mocked my choices. They would take my client relationships, my fleet, my property holdings, and fold them into their failing restaurant empire without any actual understanding of how my business operated or what made it successful. This dinner, I said, gesturing to the empty plates and wine glasses, was this some kind of test? See if I'd willingly pay $1,600 for my share of a meal I didn't even order. It was an opportunity to demonstrate your commitment to our new partnership, my father replied stiffly. The Mitchell standard of excellence requires certain expenditures. Looking around the table, I saw the situation with perfect clarity for the first time. My family had never respected me, or my choices. They had simply written me off as the family disappointment. Now that they discovered I had built something valuable, they wanted to claim it while still fundamentally looking down on the work that had created that value. The trucking thing was always beneath you anyway, Jason added, clearly attempting to be supportive in his misguided way. This is your chance to step into a more appropriate role for someone with your background. No more sleeping in truck stops or dealing with highway way stations. His comment crystallized 15 years of condescension and misunderstanding into a single moment of clarity. They didn't just disrespect my career choice, they fundamentally misunderstood everything about who I was and what I valued. I've never slept in a truck stop, I said quietly. I have a custom sleeper berth with amenities most luxury hotels would envy. My company specializes in high-value, time-critical medical deliveries that save lives. I employ 15 people who receive excellent salaries and benefits. I own my home outright, no mortgage, along with several income-producing properties. And I've done it all without ever compromising my integrity or exploiting family connections. A heavy silence fell over the table. So here's what's going to happen. I continued, reaching for my wallet. I'm not going to invest in your restructuring. I'm not going to sell my company to your holding group. And I'm certainly not going to contribute $1,600 toward a $6,000 dinner bill that was clearly part of a manipulation tactic. I counted out $40 and placed it on the table. That covers my salmon entree and 2 glasses of wine, plus a reasonable tip for the server who had nothing to do with this scheme. It's all I ordered, and it's all I'm paying for. Standing up slowly, I buttoned my suit jacket and looked at the family that had tried to use me after years of dismissing me. For 15 years, you've made it clear that I'm not really part of this family because I chose a path you didn't respect. That was painful, but it also freed me to build a life based on my own values rather than your expectations. I've created something I'm proud of, something solid and honest that helps people and treats everyone with dignity, from my employees to my clients. My father's face darkened with anger. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back. This is your last chance to be part of the Mitchell legacy. I smiled, feeling a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. I already have my own legacy, Dad. It might not have your name on it, but it's built on integrity rather than appearances. I think I prefer it that way. As I turned to leave, Amelia called after me. You'll regret this for the rest of your life, Edward. Family is everything in the end. I paused at the door, looking back at the table of shocked faces. Family should be about mutual respect and support, not exploitation dressed up as obligation. When you figure that out, you know how to reach me. With those words, I walked out of the Monarch Room past the maitre d', who seemed unsure whether to stop me, through the ornate lobby with its pretentious decor and into the cool night air. I climbed into the waiting Uber, directed the driver to the airport, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger or regret, but an overwhelming sense of freedom and clarity. The first few days after walking out of the Monarch Room were a strange mixture of emotions. There was the initial anger and hurt, of course. 15 years of family tension culminating in such a naked attempt at exploitation leaves its mark. But beneath those expected reactions was something surprising relief. It was as if I'd finally put down a heavy load I'd been carrying since I first defied my father's expectations all those years ago. The calls and messages began almost immediately. My mother left tearful voicemails about family loyalty and bridges burned beyond repair. Amelia sent clinical texts, outlining the financial opportunity I was missing and the legal implications of interfering with established business relationships when I contacted my clients to ensure they knew I had not authorized anyone to discuss transitions of their accounts. Jason's approach was perhaps the most surprising, a series of messages alternating between guilt trips about our parents' disappointment and awkward attempts to still somehow broker a deal. Dad's health isn't great, you know, one message claimed. This stress isn't helping. Couldn't you at least consider a smaller investment to keep the peace? I responded only once in a group text. To all 3 of them, I won't be discussing this further. My business is not available for acquisition or investment. Any further contact with my clients or financial institutions regarding my company will be considered interference with business relationships and addressed accordingly. 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner, I received a call from Lawrence Bennett, the restaurant financier who had been at the birthday party. Professional courtesy led me to take the call, though I suspected its purpose. Your father wanted me to reach out one last time, he began awkwardly. The situation has become more urgent than we initially presented. Meaning the business is in worse shape than you admitted that night, I translated. His pause confirmed it. The restructuring has hit some roadblocks. Without the full family investment we anticipated, we've had to explore less favorable financing options. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied genuinely. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in my father's business difficulties. Would you reconsider a partial investment? Perhaps half of the original amount, Your siblings have increased their commitments, but there's still a significant shortfall. I doubted Amelia and Jason had actually increased anything. More likely they had continued making promises based on assets they didn't have liquid access to. But that wasn't my problem to solve. My answer remains the same, I said firmly. I wish you luck with the restructuring, but I won't be participating. 2 months later, a business news alert crossed my phone. Mitchell's Fine Dining Files. Chapter 11, Reorganization, Amid Expansion Debt. The accompanying article detailed how my father's aggressive expansion plans, coupled with several years of declining revenues at the original locations, had created an unsustainable debt burden. There was no mention of family investment attempts, or the real story behind the bankruptcy filing. Through mutual connections, I learned that my father had been using new restaurant openings to paper over problems at existing locations for years, a financial shell game that finally collapsed when 3 consecutive new ventures failed to meet revenue projections. The family had attempted to blame me for the bankruptcy, claiming my last-minute withdrawal from a planned investment had triggered the crisis, a narrative that conveniently ignored the years of mismanagement that preceded it. I maintained my distance, focusing instead on the positive developments in my own life. My relationship with Sophia deepened, unencumbered by family drama. 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, during a weekend trip to the mountains, I proposed at sunrise, overlooking a misty valley. Her yes was immediate and enthusiastic. "Are you going to invite your family to the wedding?" she asked later, as we discussed plans. I considered the question carefully. "I'll send invitations. Whether they come or how they behave if they do is beyond my control." In the end, only my mother attended, sitting stiffly through the ceremony and making awkward small talk at the reception before leaving early. She hugged me briefly before departing, whispering, "Your father sends his regards," a statement I knew to be untrue, but accepted as her way of maintaining the family fiction. Sophia's family embraced me completely, her father insisting I call him Dad, and her mother treating me with the warm acceptance I'd never experienced from my own parents. My chosen family expanded 2 friends and colleagues whose connections were based on mutual respect rather than obligation or shared DNA. My business continued to thrive in the aftermath of the family rupture. The specialized medical transport division expanded into Canada, requiring additional drivers and administrative staff. I implemented an employee ownership program, ensuring that the people who helped build the company would share in its success. We established a scholarship fund for young people entering vocational training programs, particularly focused on logistics and specialized driving certifications. Through industry connections, I occasionally heard updates about my biological family. My father sold the remaining profitable restaurant locations to a hotel chain and retired with significantly reduced circumstances, though still comfortable by most standards. Amelia's law firm merged with a larger international practice, giving her the prestigious title upgrade she'd always craved. Jason relocated his medical practice to Florida, specializing in cosmetic procedures for wealthy retirees. None of this information came directly from them. The rupture remained complete, which brought both occasional sadness and profound peace. I had finally stopped measuring my life against their narrow definition of success. The most important lesson from this journey wasn't about family betrayal or standing up for myself, though those were significant. It was the deeper understanding that dignity exists in all forms of honest work, regardless of society's hierarchical judgments. The electricians, plumbers, drivers, mechanics, and countless other skilled workers without fancy titles keep our world functioning, while often receiving the least respect for their essential contributions. I found purpose, not just in the business I built, but in challenging these artificial distinctions. Through mentoring programs and public speaking at trade schools, I shared my story of finding success and fulfillment outside traditional prestige pathways. The grateful messages from young people who felt validated in their career choices became more meaningful to me than any family approval could have been. 5 years after walking out of the Monarch Room, I received an unexpected letter, actual paper mail from my father. The single page contained no apology or explicit recognition of past wrongs, but its final paragraph suggested some evolution in his thinking. At 65, I thought I knew what success looked like. At 70, I'm less certain, Your mother and I are considering downsizing to a smaller house, less to maintain fewer rooms we never use. Perhaps there's wisdom in that simplicity you always favored. I never responded directly, but I sent a card when their anniversary came around. Small steps, perhaps insignificant in the grand scheme of family healing. But like my business built one delivery at a time, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the most meaningful journeys. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have stood your ground or given in to family pressure? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences with family expectations. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about standing up for your choices. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to value their own path, even when others don't understand it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that true success isn't measured by others' expectations, but by the integrity with which you build your own life.